When I was broke and living in a truck, my family laughed. Years later, after clawing my way up and finally buying a house, they showed up demanding I hand it over for my golden child brother. So yeah, this is the story of how I went from homeless to homeowner, only to have my toxic parents and my brother's gremlin of a wife try to evict me from my house. Let's rewind. I'm a single guy in my early 30s. My younger brother, Dan, let's call him that, is 29, married to a woman who could win Oscars for playing the victim. Dan and his wife already have 4 kids. And yes, they all live at my parents' place because, shocker, they can't afford anything else. Dan works, but his wife refuses to get a job even though she has a college degree. And my mom? She plays full-time grandma/daycare. Growing up, it was crystal clear that Dan was the favorite. I was the scapegoat. If he punched me, I got grounded. If he stole my stuff, I got told to share. When extended family started catching on and questioning it, my parents picked up and moved us 150 miles away. Problem solved, right? No nosy relatives to witness the circus. Dan was the golden child, and I was the guy who got the leftovers unless someone was watching. Then it was all smiles and fake equality. I moved out as soon as I legally could, even though I hadn't even finished high school yet. I couch surfed, worked crappy jobs, ate way too many instant noodles and made it work. Because living on the edge beat living under their roof. Flash forward to 2020, we all know what hit the fan. I lost my job, couldn't afford my condo, and my roommate bailed. I had no savings, no backup plan, and no family support. I had to sell almost everything and bought a $1,000 camper to slap on my truck. Welcome to the camper life. I tried asking my parents if I could at least park it at their place. Just to sleep safely at night. They said no. We have a full house. You know that. But it wasn't just that. They wanted me to pay the equivalent of full rent to park in their driveway. I was on unemployment, living in a camper, and they wanted the kind of cash that could get me an actual apartment. So I parked in a grocery store lot and prayed no one would break in while I slept. Dan and his wife thought it was hilarious. She even laughed in my face and called me a homeless bum. Dan just joined in. If Rock Bottom had a fan club, I was the president. I spent months like that, constantly moving, dealing with weirdos, Karens, and HOA wannabes. I plugged into random buildings at night just to keep the fridge running in the camper. Eventually, I landed a job, then another. Then, finally, I caught a break, a decent-paying supervisor role at a warehouse. I lived behind that warehouse in my camper. The owner was chill. He let me hook up to power and water and didn't ask questions. I worked every shift I could. I saved every penny. Fast forward to this year. I found a modest manufactured home close to work. 3 bedrooms. Backyard. Small but perfect. I used my entire savings on a down payment and got approved for a loan. I moved in. I cried. I finally had a home. And then, in a moment of pure idiocy, I bragged about it online. Posted pictures. Said I was proud. That's when the entitlement kicked in. Dan, his wife, my parents. They showed up uninvited to see the place. I never gave them the address. They either stalked me at work or had someone spill. They barged in like they owned the place, started touring around, and dropping hints like bricks. You don't need all this space. This would be great for Dan's family. It's so close to Dan's job. Then Dan asked to talk privately. And that's when the real nightmare began. So Dan pulls me aside and gives me this big speech about how hard things have been lately. How cramped it is living with our parents. How his wife is stressed. How the kids need space. All the usual violin-playing sympathy bait. Then he hits me with, this house, it would really solve everything for us. I blinked. Thought maybe I misunderstood. Wait, are you saying you want to move in with me? Dan smiled smugly. I know you're going to say yes. No, I mean you could move back in with Mom and Dad. We could buy the house from you. I nearly laughed in his face. First off, that house isn't a mansion. It's a modest manufactured home. 3 bedrooms, sure, but nothing extravagant. Second, and most importantly, I just bought it. With my savings, my credit, my blood, sweat, and borderline mental breakdowns. But Dan was serious. He thought he was doing me a favor. Like letting me move back into the same house where I was once denied driveway space was some kind of reward. I told him flat out, this house isn't for sale. Not to you. Not to anyone. That should have been the end of it. But nope. He stormed off like I just insulted his ancestors. 5 minutes later, Mom corners me in the kitchen. Why are you being so selfish? This is family. Dan needs help. Selfish. Me. The guy who lived in a camper for 2 years because they wouldn't let me crash in their driveway. The guy who built himself up from zero with no help from anyone. She said I didn't need the space. That as a single guy, 3 bedrooms was excessive. And that it was my duty to support my brother. You turned out fine, didn't you? She said. Yes, Mom. I turned out fine despite you, not because of you. Then Dad joined in. He was more passive-aggressive about it, like, just think about the kids, all right? They deserve better. I told them to leave. I literally had to escort my own parents and brother off my property. They acted like I was the crazy one, that I was having a meltdown over nothing. But it didn't end there. The next day, I started getting calls. From family members I barely talk to family members. Why are you being so cruel to your brother? He has kids, you don't. You can always buy another house. Apparently, Dan and his wife launched a full-blown sob story tour, telling everyone how I stole a house they were looking at, that I lied about not wanting to help, that I was hoarding space just to spite them. People were offering to mediate the situation. One end even said maybe just let them stay for a year. You can live in the camper again. I blocked half my contact list. Then texted me, we're family, man. Don't make this ugly. Too late. It was already ugly. And I was done playing the nice guy. I replied, family doesn't try to steal from each other. Lose my number. He didn't like that. The texts that came after were full of guilt trips, passive threats, and one lovely message from his wife saying I was a bitter little man who hates seeing others happy. Bitter? Lady, I lived in a truck for 2 years eating dollar store chili while your husband laughed at me. I earned this house. And no one's taking it from me without a fight. After the guilt texts and social media smear campaign, I thought things would cool down. Maybe they'd realize I wasn't bluffing. Maybe they'd back off and go back to ignoring me like they had for the last decade. But clearly, I was still giving them too much credit. A week after the house invasion, I got a certified letter from my parents. A literal, signed letter. Inside was a multi-page guilt bomb. Basically a written ultimatum dressed up in fancy, emotionally manipulative packaging. As your family, we have supported you through tough times, lie. Now we ask you to show compassion to your brother who has 4 mouths to feed. Translation, give up your house. They said it would be best if I sold the home to Dan and moved in with them just for a while. Just until things settled. Because, apparently, all the trauma I endured in that house growing up wasn't real and I should be thrilled to relive it for the sake of my freeloading brother. And the best part? They offered me $15,000. That's right. 15 grand. For a home I bought for 6 times that price. The audacity was so overwhelming I had to reread it just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. I took a photo of the letter and posted it online. No names, just the message. The internet did what the internet does, exploded. Thousands of strangers validated what I already knew deep down. I wasn't crazy. This was next level entitlement. Dan saw the post. And oh, he lost it. Messaged me nonstop. Said I was making the family look bad. That I was airing private matters publicly. He even called my job pretending to be a concerned citizen trying to get me fired for harassment. Luckily, my boss is not an idiot. She called me into her office, showed me the voicemail, and said, your brother sounds like a lunatic. I don't know what he's on, but we're not buying it. Dan escalated. He and his wife started showing up at my house uninvited. Once with their kids as if trying to guilt me with puppy dog eyes and sticky fingers. They stood on my porch like it was some Hallmark movie except instead of hugs and forgiveness, it was awkward stares and subtle threats. I installed security cameras. Deadbolts. A ring cam. Told the neighbors. Dan tried to claim I was overreacting. Right? Because I'm the unstable one. Then came the family meeting. Mom invited me over just to talk. Said they were making dinner. I don't know why I went. Morbid curiosity maybe. Or the naive hope that this would be the moment they finally saw me as something other than their expendable fallback plan. Instead, they ambushed me. The whole living room was set up like an intervention. My parents. Dan. His wife. Even their pastor, who I hadn't seen since high school, was there. They sat me down and said, point blank, we forgive you. We understand this has been hard for you, but you need to stop this selfishness before it poisons the family. They said they were offering me a path to redemption. I laughed. And then I stood up, looked each one of them in the eye and said, I forgave myself the day I realized I didn't owe any of you a damn thing. Then I walked out. Haven't been back since. But don't worry, they weren't done yet. After I walked out of that ridiculous family ambush, I figured they'd get the message. I figured the silence would finally sink in. Spoiler, it didn't. Less than a week later, I got a visit from Child Protective Services. No warning. No notice. Just a knock at my door and a serious-looking woman holding a clipboard. Apparently, someone had called in a report that I was behaving erratically, screaming at children, and possibly hiding weapons in the home. I live alone. No kids. No weapons. No reason for anyone to even suspect that kind of thing. The agent was professional, but you could tell she felt awkward. She did a walkthrough, asked a few questions, and after 10 minutes said, honestly, this seems like a bogus call. But we still have to document everything. I knew exactly who was behind it. There are only a handful of people on the planet who would stoop low enough to weaponize the system out of petty revenge. Dan and his wife had been spiraling since I said no. And now they were clearly trying to make my life hell until I cracked. So I called my lawyer. Yep, I got a lawyer. One of the smartest things I ever did. We documented everything, the texts, the fake CPS report, the unwanted visits, the attempts to get me fired. We built a whole file just in case they ever tried to push further. I also finally filed a cease and desist letter. Sent one to Dan, one to his wife, one to my parents. Clear language, legal tone. Basically said, contact me again and you're getting sued. You'd think that would be the end. And for a moment it seemed like it might be. Silence. Then came the nuclear option. Dan's wife posted this long, sob story rant on Facebook. Full of lies. Said I had promised the house to them. Said I kicked them out in the middle of winter. Said I threatened the kids. Called me emotionally unstable, accused me of mental illness, said I had a history of dangerous behavior. People started messaging me. Some defending me. Others asking what happened. But one thing was clear, they were trying to ruin my reputation now. Make it so uncomfortable that I just give in and walk away from everything I built. Except I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the kid who got blamed for everything. I wasn't the guy in the camper who had to take abuse because he had nowhere else to go. I was a homeowner. So I did what any reasonable adult does when people try to assassinate your character publicly. I printed every screenshot, forwarded every message, and sent it to my lawyer. We sent another round of letters. Defamation notices this time. They weren't legally binding yet, but the next step would be. And I made it very clear that I would take them there if they didn't back off. Guess what happened? Dan went silent. His wife deleted her post. My parents, for the first time in months, didn't say a word. Dead silence. That's how I knew I'd won the battle. Weeks passed. The silence was almost eerie. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could hear myself think again. No surprise visits, no Facebook posts, no sudden explosions of family loyalty texts from cousins who didn't even know my birthday. Just peace. And that's when I realized something. They weren't done because they respected me, they were done because I finally put up a wall they couldn't climb. And I had to be the one to keep it that way. I started locking down everything. Changed my phone number. Updated all my account passwords. Blocked every last one of them on social media and made everything private. Even let a few people at work know not to give out any info about me, not even what kind of coffee I drink. But even as I built a quiet, calm life around me, I could still feel the tremors from the earthquake they caused. Mentally, emotionally, I was running on fumes. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't relax. I kept expecting the next shoe to drop. So I did something I never thought I would. I took time off. PTO. Packed up, unplugged, and took a solo trip out to the coast. Just me, a rented cabin, and silence. And in that silence, I did something else I never thought I'd do. I cried. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in years, I finally felt safe. I didn't realize how much of my life had been spent in defense mode. Defending my sanity, my space, my self-worth. And now finally, I could breathe without feeling like someone was waiting to pounce. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just about a house. It never was. It was about agency, control, ownership. My family had trained me to believe that anything I built belonged to them. That my achievements were just temporary assets to be redistributed according to need. But not anymore. That house? It was mine. Not just legally, but spiritually. It represented every miserable night in that camper, every crappy job, every time I swallowed my pride just to survive. And now it represented freedom. When I got back from the coast, I repainted the living room. Tossed out the old second-hand couch I'd been dragging around since college. Got myself a dog. A rescue mutt with a crooked ear and the energy of a caffeinated toddler. I named him Diesel. Diesel doesn't care about drama. He just wants snacks and belly rubs. I started sleeping better. I started cooking real meals again. Even started dating. Nothing serious, just human connection that wasn't rooted in guilt or obligation. Every once in a while, I'll get a whiff of the past. A message request I never open. A card in the mailbox around the holidays, love, mom and dad. No return address. I don't respond. I don't need to. I've said everything I needed to say with my actions. I know some people reading this will think I went too far. That family is family, no matter what. That forgiveness is the higher road. To them, I say this. Forgiveness doesn't mean setting yourself on fire so others can stay warm. It means learning the lesson, breaking the cycle, and choosing peace over performance. And I chose peace. So yeah, they tried to take my house. Instead, they just proved why they were never welcome in it. And I'm good with that. You know what people don't talk about enough? Closure. Not the kind you beg for in a dramatic phone call or the kind you hope will magically show up in the form of a tearful apology. I'm talking about the closure you build yourself. The kind you earn by surviving the storm and walking out the other side with your head high. That's where I am now. About a month after I got back from the coast, I got an invite in the mail. A real paper invitation. Cream cardstock, gold embossed, the whole 9 yards. It was for a birthday party. Dan's oldest kid was turning 8. The invitation said, "Please join us to celebrate family, love, and new beginnings." Yeah, sure. I stared at that envelope for a good 5 minutes, flipping it over in my hand like it might explode. Part of me was morbidly curious. Would they actually pretend nothing happened? Would they expect me to show up smiling, bring a gift, take photos like some deranged family mascot? I didn't go. But I did send a gift. A framed photo. Of me. Standing in front of my house. With Diesel. Both of us were smiling like idiots. Underneath the photo, I included a short, handwritten note: "Thank you for reminding me what I never want to go back to." Petty? Maybe. Factual? Absolutely. I never heard back. Not a text. Not a call. But my cousin later told me Dan's wife threw a tantrum and accused me of trying to ruin the party. As if I had burst in wearing a villain's cape and monologued over the cake. All I did was lie. And that, apparently, is the biggest insult you can give to people who only wanted you around when you were struggling. These days, my life is quiet. In the best way. I started a small garden in my backyard. I learned to cook something other than microwave pasta. Diesel has his own dog bed, which he never uses because apparently my bed is his now. I go to work, I come home, I rest. There's no drama. No random knocks at my door. No ambush letters or phony Facebook posts. Just peace. Real, hard-earned, boring peace. And here's the twist: I actually feel grateful for everything they put me through. Because without the pain, I never would have set boundaries. Without the betrayal, I never would have found clarity. And without them trying to take everything from me, I never would have realized how much I was capable of building on my own. So, if you're in the middle of your own version of this mess, wondering if you're the villain for saying no, or if you're overreacting by choosing yourself, let this be your sign. You're not crazy. You're just waking up. And trust me, there's nothing sweeter than walking away from people who thought you couldn't. Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I do. Help this small channel grow by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. Every bit of support means the world. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.